Hey everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka MBT, back with another piece of easy content. A well-researched Banlist prediction video. One of the hardest parts about playing Yu-Gi-Oh! From the perspective of a new player is the astronomical amount of cards that are on the Forbidden and Limited list. There's nearly 200, and I think we can shave about 40 of them off clean. Before we get into this list that will not only rectify the problems with the current format, but also bring Yu-Gi-Oh! Into a glorious new age, and potentially ruin it in the process, I do have to point out this was made in collaboration with the individuals on my Twitch.tv channel. We had a gay old time. I wake up every day and I go, thank you, Jesus Christ, for descending to Earth for the second coming, banning outer entity as a thought, and then leaving. Can Ratpier come back? What does Ratpier do? It just foolishes on summon. We'll be fine. Now to take a big sip of water and read the effect of Ratpier. You're not winning this argument? We're not having an argument! This isn't a Socratic seminar. I'm a dictator, and I'm telling you, we're unbanning Masterpiece. And if you'd like to be a part of the process that makes these videos in the future, give me a follow at twitch.tv/mbtYuGiOh. I've got a link in the description to that channel as well. I stream Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and if you're catching this on the day it debuts, I'm currently casting the third largest online live Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournament ever. I hope you'll check it out, and in the meantime, enjoy my terrible opinions. We'll begin with a quick overview. Every single ban list needs to accomplish something specific, and determining what that specific thing is important before you start wildly hitting random cards. Remember, the goal of a ban list isn't to make sure Zodiac doesn't post a very hurtful anti-Konami meme on December 15th when we don't have a list. The purpose of a ban list is to rectify a problem in the format. In my opinion, that problem is the current top decks. I don't find Dragon Link or Infernoble or Virtual World or Invoke Dogmatica or Dinosaur particularly fun to play against. Underneath that metagame, there are some additional decks like Zodiac, Eldritch, Prank Kids, and Phantom Knights that I don't find nearly as obtrusive. Because of that, I am aiming to hit those decks specifically and bring their power more in line with the decks below them. Now, if this results in a format where something like Phantom Knights is suddenly a top-tier deck, oh no, a combo deck that loses to Nibiru, however will the players adapt? But if you're wondering why I've hit a whole bunch of cards from one or two very specific decks, and none from the format-destroying super threat Prank Kid, that's why. We'll begin with a list of cards I want banned. Topping that list, and this should surprise no one, is True King of All Calamities. I've been an advocate for a VFD ban for a long time now, 2 or 3 formats, and now it looks like other people are finally taking notice. This card is currently slated to be hit because of Virtual World, a deck that makes it almost every single game. Dinosaur can technically make it, but most people are off those long-form combos. This is the least exciting end boss of all time. It's not fun for either player at the table. It's an AoE skill drain, plus it locks your opponent from the battle phase. It's very hard to remove, it prevents your opponent from playing, and because you have to invest so many resources into it, usually it takes a couple of turns to actually attack them for lethal. It is a miserable type of Yu-Gi-Oh! That it enables, and unfortunately, that's what's being played at top tables nationwide. I really hope they hit this card. Next up is Gar Dragon LP. This is a card that there was a huge clamor for a ban maybe 3 or 4 months ago that has sort of all but dropped off. Dragon Link is incredibly powerful. It's arguably the best deck and has been for a long time, due in part to Gar Dragon LP. And we have other hits on this list specifically targeted at Gar Dragon and Dragon adjacent Link decks, but I think LP is probably due. It constrains design, you can't print really good dragons that could potentially link into an LP, you can't make things move monsters, and unfortunately, you can't print powerful dragons that, if summoned from the extra deck, functionally win the game. I would really like to see this card go, if only to make Dragon Link players have less catch-up ability than they do now. It is so frustrating to out all of your Dragon Link opponent's game plan, only for them to slam down the Reborn spell, move this sucker over, bring out a Brotar, and go into Levianeer. Miserable. Next is Linkross. I think that one part of the Halqifibrax Linkross Martial Metal Marcher combo will be hit in the upcoming ban list, and I certainly hope this is the one. Linkross resolves a lot of problems. It functionally hits Infernoble Knights so hard that they have to relab almost all of their combos, and it prevents the unbelievably frustrating synergy between Martial Metal Marcher and every single tuner in the game that ends on at least one additional negate for any bread and butter combo. It is absolutely atrocious, and I wish that Konami would just stop printing cards that make tokens. How many times can we make this mistake? Next is Dragon Buster Destruction Sword. Boy, oh boy, this card is not fun. Remember when we had an entire deck whose identity was it locks you from the extra? Rest in peace, Monarch. Now anyone can do it for the cost of a Union Carrier. What I like about this hit is that Buster Blader fans might be a little upset that they aren't able to play this card anymore, until you realize that Buster Blader engines usually don't include this. Its only purpose, functionally, is to sit in your spell and trap card zone and lock your opponent. Finally, we've banned Wind-Up Hunter for a reason that will become apparent shortly. Now for the limited list, and here's where I'm going to get flamed by the comments. Oh, write all you want, I'm not gonna read them. And you are seeing that correctly. We will talk about the monsters in a second. We'll begin with the extra deck, however. First is Saruya. There's a ton of deep draw payoffs that are on the list specifically because this card is not at 1. Things like Slash Draw, for example, the Arcana Force the World FTK enablers. All of these cards exist specifically because you can Saruya 3 times in one turn. Deep draw becomes garbage if this card's limited, and I think it probably should be. Next up is Mirage Stalio. Oh, Salaman Great. Such a long-lived, flexible, adaptable deck, now reduced to rogue garbage. I think Salaman Great Mirage Stalio would be fantastic for the archetype. It would give it a lot of really powerful extension. It's a really strong removal spell that the deck desperately needs, and it's pretty easy to play around. It's a really strong choke point if you have something like an Ash Blossom or an Infinite Impermanence. It both helps players that are not particularly up to speed about what they should be hitting against Salaman Great, and Salaman Great players who are looking to actually win a round every so often. I also put Danglong on here. This is a little contentious. I have long been a fan of keeping Danglong behind bars forever, but I think the time is probably right. The investment on this card is a ton. It's not exactly Eve, and for that reason, I do feel comfortable putting it to 1, but I'm sure people in the comments will show me 57 FTKs that this enables. In terms of main deck monsters, we've got A-Lister. I'm very flexible on this hit. It can be Magical Meltdown. Hell, you can even ban Invocation. I'd love that. I'm just sick of this card. As long as A-Lister exists, every single deck is constantly going to be weighing its normal summon against playing a 6-card invoked engine, and I really don't like that type of deck building. Next up is Miscellaneousaurus. I'm putting it to 1, but I would also be comfortable banning this card. This card is so frustrating to play against. I'm sure everyone who has watched a Farfa video in the last 6 months can tell you, but Have You Read Misk is a meme for a reason. The fact that this blanks so much interaction that is desperately needed against Dinosaur, and the fact that it extends while doing so, is one of the most frustrating parts of playing against the deck. I've also got Malicious to 1. I'm removing the semi-limited list, as you'll see momentarily, and for that reason, every single card at semi has been put to 3, with the exception of Malicious, which is probably just a little too good. I'd love him to come back, but I know he wouldn't be played in Heroes. Okay, so don't flame me. Don't flame me. That is Masterpiece, the true Draco Slaying King. I think we can bring Masterpiece back. I know it sounds really goddamn dumb. And I share your fear, because I played so much of this format, if I ever have to see this card again, I probably will have an aneurysm. That said, is this card really too strong in today's day and age? What advantages does this card have over Dragoon, for example? Does it trade favorably with Dragoon? If every deck has an easily accessible out to this card in the form of monsters from the extra deck with high attack, remember it's only got 2950 if you can remove that diagram, or just general negation, you can probably either prevent this card from ever coming out and deal with it once it's hit the field, no matter what you're playing. It might just be a relic of 2017 and 2018 that we all have a residual fear of, and I think putting it to 1 for a format wouldn't warp anything too drastically. If you're afraid that Masterpiece would be too strong, I urge you to read the rest of the True Draco spells and traps, and remember, by today's standards, they suck. Finally, we've got 1 copy of Harp Horror, also not particularly sure this is a good idea. Rusty Bardish does a lot for Orchest, and giving them one of the most powerful tools in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is also quite bad. However, Orchest is terrible. It's really bad. It's full of garnets, and in this day and age, I struggle to think why you would play it over a comparable deck like Phantom Knights that has fewer garnets and more accessible end bosses. The payoff used to be something like Dingirsu, but with easily accessible extra deck monsters like Dragoon that functionally perform the same role, you might not even consider playing Orcust if you're doing some sort of monster combo. Now, prepare for my ultimate take. You've seen the ban list. You've seen the limited list. Now prepare for an unlimited list with 45 cards! I urge you to keep an open mind. I actually think this would shake up Yu-Gi-Oh! Very little. How many of the cards, just at a glance, would you consider playing if they came to 3? Sure, this does enable a couple of really degenerate, low consistency, YouTube quality combos, but I think it's a net good for Yu-Gi-Oh! To preserve that style of gameplay and take like 15 pieces of chaff off the list. Plus, it'll make me some ad revenue when I get to make Tempest Magician FTK for 10-minute testing. First, we've got Tempest Magician. This card FTKs, but very inconsistently. The mechanism by which they FTK was probably not viable when it was originally hit, and it's certainly not viable after we've hit a significant amount of the enablers since. Tolmaeus was a very strong card when people were scared of turn 1 CDI, but making 2 4-star monsters into a rank 4, and then waiting until the end phase so you can put a third one under it, just so you can on your opponent's turn make a CDI, is laughable in a format where you can do the same thing but with a VFD. We've got Wind-Up Carrier Zenmaity. This is a Reddit thing. I trust their judgment, which is a huge mistake, I'm sure. But they said swap Hunter for Zenmaity, and I oblige. Dulorn has an errata that makes it much less degenerate. Once the errata comes out, it can safely come to 3. Ignister Prominence. I don't get this one. I don't get it. Does someone know something about this card that I don't? Does this card enable something? Like, why is this card at 1? It looks like a really bad 8-star synchro. I can't believe it. Hyper Librarian, I think, can also come to 3. I know that, like, powerful synchro decks exist, but I don't think there's any that are going to draw their entire deck if Hyperlib goes too far. I think Hyper Librarian's been played in one deck in recent memory, and it was a long Jet Synchron-enabled combo strategy in which you drew a couple of cards over the course of a long combo. Going into a second Hyper Librarian wouldn't have improved that, and the way that extra decks are built nowadays, one-ofs of really powerful engine cards like this are really all you want to play anyway. Trishula is potentially bad for hand loop reasons, but if you can get 3 9-star synchros out on the first turn, I mean, you can probably FTK. We've got Daigusto Emerald. I don't remember why this was hit to 1. I think in the last video I said it was something to do with a World Chalice FTK, but I think it actually had to do with Zodiac. It's a hit that just lacks any context in the current day and age. This card is currently not really played at all, and probably wouldn't be even if it went to 3, outside of, like, the one person still trying to make Gem Knight work. We've got ABC Dragon Buster, easily go to 3, it's currently at 2 and is doing nothing. Same with Totally Awesome. Bahamut Shark, what a flop. Now to the main deck. We've got Astrograph Sorcerer, and I know all of the Pendulum stands are just creaming in their jeans. This card was really, really strong because of Electromite, and because of a significant amount of really powerful Pendulum spellcasters that existed in the same format. Now, most of the power of those cards has gone down significantly. You know, contextually, other cards are better and do more. And without Electromite, Astrograph Sorcerer is really only okay. I think it could safely come back, but I am willing to be convinced otherwise. Cyberjar is a really, really good monster that unfortunately has the text flip on it. So it can probably come back as well, though it is going to enable a bunch of really funny empty jar FTKs with a 1% win rate. I think Victory Dragon should come off because it's funny. Everyone says it has to stay on because the opponent can just scoop. Yes, that's very funny. If you play Victory Dragon and your opponent scoops on its attack, and you call over a judge and say, my opponent scooped on the attack, think how hilarious it will be for you to hear, yeah, you're allowed to surrender at any time. Just don't play the card. Why does it have to take up space on the list? Yatagarasu is actually very bad. People assume that this card is very strong because it has the forbidden phrase, skip their next draw phase on it, but in fact, the card dies to all removal that doesn't put them under any sort of clock, so if they've got any sort of hard ones per turn that they are managing instead of the top of their deck, then they're going to be able to out your board. I mean, realistically, the draw phase matters less than managing hops in current Yu-Gi-Oh! It wasn't even particularly good when Yata was legal, it just made the least fun board states in the history of time possible. It was a fun hit, not a playability hit. And now that fun has completely eclipsed Yata, we can probably bring it back. Butterfly Dagger Elmo was hit because of, I think, some interactions between Gearfried and itself. This could potentially see play in Infernoble Knight, maybe, but it's a pretty strict condition. The card has to be destroyed and sent to the graveyard while it's equipped to a monster to go back to the hand, so it's not infinite fodder like people expect. Phoenix Blade already does its job much better. We've got self-destruct button. This is very funny. I'm not actually very familiar with how the rules regarding ties work. If you can win game 1 and then force a draw game 2 and that wins you the set, then we probably can't let this card exist. But in reality, the condition on it is so hard to fulfill that I'm sure it's fine. Time Seal, another very bad card. People expect, again, because draw phase is printed in the text, that it's very strong, but in fact, you can't flip it until your opponent's second turn. If you go first and hit Time Seal, you can't activate it before they have an opportunity to draw a card, so you'll be skipping their follow-up turn's draw, which sucks. Every piece of Exodia can come off. Exodia is just not particularly consistent, and moreover, putting more cards in your deck that aren't draw spells is probably a bad thing for Exodia. Like, imagine opening a hand of 3 left hands and 2 right hands and expecting to win the game. We've got Pankratops. This is the first really contentious hit, I think, on here. Pankratops was a really cool card at 3. It was a fun catch-up mechanic for going second, an easy board for a lot of decks that didn't incidentally run into its special summoning condition. I think that, and this is just my own conspiracy that I have literally no basis for believing, it was limited to pump sales for Lightning Storm specifically. The two cards are so similar insofar as what they do, and the fact that they're both catch-up mechanics for going second decks means that in order to sell one of them, you might actually have to hit another. I don't think either is more or less powerful than the other, and I think we should probably put Pankratops to 3 if the other really powerful going second cards are also there as well. Double Iris Magician has done literally nothing since it was unhit. Put it back to 3, who cares? Birdman probably enables a couple of loops, but I haven't seen any that are particularly compelling, so I feel comfortable putting it to 3 as well. Archfiend is probably still not good if Launcher is at 1, but I do want to stress, don't put both of them to 3. That would be very bad. Morphing Jar, another really powerful jar that has flip in its text and as a result isn't very powerful. Night Assailant, people want to keep limited because if you have 2 copies, you can loop them, they can add back each other. Getting that to happen is really, really difficult, and there's not really a very good payoff to infinitely discarding these days. Maybe you can increase the attack of Dark Crusader to infinite levels, but that's like a really, really specific 3-card combo that needs your battle phase. I just don't see it happening. Darkness Metal Dragon got an errata and is probably fine. Lithiosogym, people were really scared that this card was going to take over the meta when it was put to 1, but no one's playing it at 1. Everyone says if it was at 3, people were playing it. If it's at 1 and no one's playing it, they're not going to play it when it's at 3 and no one's playing it. The fear in this card is that it'll banish individual cards from the extra deck, and to that I say, good! The extra deck should be abolished! After that, we've got a Hero Lives. Heroes aren't doing anything. This card can probably come off, despite the fact that it enables maybe some easy Isold setups with, like, Vion into Malicious, but if we're limiting Malicious anyway, who really cares? It's also the cornerstone of some really dumb FTKs where you special summon Stratos, but I don't think those are consistent enough to warrant an inclusion. Card Destruction, another piece of deep draw that is on the list pretty much because Saruya is. I think this card's fine. It's very funny to activate Card Destruction, but it sees 0 play. I think it would see 0 play at 3 as well, despite the fact that historically it's been very powerful. Chain Strike, same deal. Burn just isn't accomplishing anything. It's too slow of a clock. The tools just aren't there compared to the power of modern monsters, and Chain Strike could come to 3 no problem in my opinion. We've got Dimensional Fissure. This one is a little suspect. I really like the macro floodgates. I think they're super cool. I like that there is a way to interact with the graveyard and the banished zone. There's really not outside of these cards, and I think it's important for there to be meaningful side tools against decks that aim to use the graveyard as a secondary hand. Dimensional Fissure is the worst of the two as well, although it does enable some silly stuff because you get first crack at banishing cards if you're playing something like Metaphys. That said, who cares? Draco Face Off, another really powerful Pendulum card that I don't know why it's on here. It was on here for, like, Pepe reasons, and the age of Pepe has long expired. If Draco Face Off was legal, do you think people would really be playing Master Pendulum? I doubt it. We've got Gold Sarcophagus, hit because of Thunder. Thunder's biggest payoff no longer exists, and while Chaos decks could be quite powerful, I think that, like, enabling better Valkyria setups is probably a good thing considering that it sees next to no play right now. Midbreaker is on here because of scary FTKs. It prevents your opponent from interacting with you with hand traps. I don't think that's a particularly big deal. It seems like a very bricky card for YouTube combo decks to draw into. It was never played in any of them until someone figured it out during set rotation format because it was such a good set rotation target. I don't like it. Sekka's Light could probably go to 3 as well. It was played a little bit in that Block Dragon BA deck that was really cool, but in general, you just don't want to pass up the really powerful spells and traps. Playing Sekka's Light would be a really sweet way to make decks actually pick if they want to be playing spells and traps or not, though the quality of monster is just going to go up forever, so I could see keeping it at 1 as well. Slash Draw enables an FTK, but it's very contingent on resolving 3 Saruya, so I'm not particularly scared of it. Reasoning to 3 is also a huge sus hit, but it won't make Infernoid too good. It'll be used in really ridiculous stuff. That said, Reasoning sees 0 play. The decks that don't play Reasoning probably would not play Reasoning. I can't imagine playing it in like Dragon Link or something, and as a result, I'm not very scared of bringing it off. Trickstar Light Stage was hit because people were afraid making 2 monsters was too powerful because of generic Link 2s, I believe. I don't find that particularly compelling. I think we could easily put this to 3, and that the Trickstars are a pretty terrible deck by which to do that. Macrocosmos, same reasoning as Dimensional Fissure. Wall of Revealing Light. I think this was on here for, like, life equalizer reasons. Why is this card on here, actually? It's something to do with artificially setting your life points very low. A trap that said no monsters can attack would be completely fine in today's day and age. And finally, Seer and Graph can probably come to 3. So those are my thoughts. I certainly believe this would cut the chaff on the ban list. Are there any synergies that I'm missing? Are there any decks that are enabled by this list? If this list came out, what would you be playing and how would you be FTKing your opponent? Let me know in the comments section below. Check out my Twitch if you want to be a part of the next one of these. And until then, I'll see you next time.